Okay, here we go. We're going to start. This is Brian Parnell here with Virtual Pros. This is our very first podcast, and I want to introduce myself, my company. We partner with med spas and other wellness and beauty firms to help them become more profitable using AI and automation systems. And this is our first podcast. I want to introduce my very first guest, Jennifer Rushing. She is with Banyan Bamboo Med Spa out of South Austin, Texas. She recently acquired this business. Maybe was it 9 months ago or so, Jennifer? And
It was a year and a half.
Year and a half ago. And so I'm just curious as to, and by the way, welcome to the show, and thank you for doing this with me. So this is very exciting for me. And if you could just kind of tell us just a little bit about why you were interested in acquiring that med spa. What was the reason that you wanted to do that?
I've just gotten to the point in my life where I've always loved business, but I really wanted to step out into a different space. I love working with women. I love seeing powerful women. I love, mentoring and training. And, one of my things about running a business, no matter what it is allowing people to become really their best self in the workplace. And that takes a lot of effort. You really have to support and encourage and train and stay connected. And that it's very difficult to do. You've got a million things, but I love this space because I have the opportunity to do that with my employees. And then also it's primarily women as customers as well.
Sure. No, absolutely. And it sounds like you were very motivated to build that and to really be a reputable brand for your industry, which is amazing. So what exactly is your leadership philosophy when it comes to your business?
As far as leadership goes, I'm a collaborator by nature. So I'm not a do this, do that, goat herder kind of person. I like to set a vision. I like to model and example what that looks like. I have very high standards, but I always expect more of myself than anyone else. So my leadership looks like I work with everyone there, and they work with me, and we make our team better. We all bring value to the table, and recognizing that in each other, I think is just really key to be consistent, and to show that you truly value people and you value their, what they bring, and you have to slow down to do that.
Right, absolutely. And you mentioned on a previous conversation that there's a real burnout in this industry with wellness. What is your team strategy for kind of helping to prevent a lot of that burnout when it comes to that?
We're in the self-care industry, and often, I look at my team and they're just constantly giving. They're touching people all day, every day. Which can be very rewarding and also very challenging. And so what I'm trying to do is create a space where everyone has the downtime to get their own self-care and,
Sure.
to give it to their team members, and that also helps them to speak to the services that we give. But I try to schedule team days where people can come in and get, their massage, and then the massage therapists can get their facials and just, take a load off, breathe, be friends, but also really encouraging them to prioritize their self-care that we're telling everyone else to.
Right. Sense. So they're giving each other their own services too at the same time. Yeah, that's great. That's a really good environment and a good strategy too. How do you define your brand? How did you come up with the name, and what's your vision for your brand?
Well, I'm actually from Alaska and Hawaii. I grew up between states. So banyan trees are kind of, to me, they symbolize Hawaii. They're the thing. They stay longer than we'll ever stay. They were there before we were, and they'll be there long after we are. Their roots are strong. Bamboo is flexible. It's adaptable. It pops up everywhere. It's the biggest pest ever, and you just can't get rid of it. It is amazing. So for me, Banyan Bamboo really came from that, like the power of strength and adaptability. But then, the brand voice for me is really, when I build a brand, I'm always looking for, if this company were a person, how would this person speak? Are they clinical and cold and super techy, or are they, warm and witty? And so by kind of developing that, then I can build around, everything. I mean, everything that you put out there, from marketing to your website, to your communications, to social, and everything in between has to be consistent with your brand voice. People need to understand what they're getting into with you. They
Mhm.
need to know that they're a good fit, and that's where trust comes in. Is we have to be consistent. We have to be confident, and part of that too is we're a she, in my opinion, um, as an entity. And so women are warm, they're nurturing, they're collaborative, they're strong. And so I kind of pulled all of that around it, and I'm hoping that that is constantly communicated with consistency.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love the take off of the banyan tree and its survivability and endurance. And that's really strong. That's great for your branding. Absolutely.
I
So,
have a story about it.
okay. Yeah, let's hear it.
The Lahaina fires, almost 2 years ago now. I don't know if you heard much about that, but it wiped out, Old Town Lahaina, which has been there forever, um, and a beautiful place. And it had a giant banyan tree, which was kind of in the center of the square. Um, and so when that fire ripped through, it just decimated that tree. It was
Mm,
still standing, but it was skeletal. It was charcoal. It was charred. And people were grieving it. We were
mhm.
all grieving it. It was such a loss. And then, and that was actually just right before, I was buying this business, and I was thinking about names. And then about 3 months after the fire, people started seeing little green buds popping out of it. And
Wow.
something that everyone thought was dead and gone was actually alive. And it just took a little time for it to recover. But, that's how I see business. A lot of times we just don't know how we're going to do it. We don't know how we're going to pull it out. And we feel like that inside. But, for me, it was inspiring, to the top level, to be able to think of, if it can do it, I can do it.
No, that's actually a amazing way of thinking about it. And I know a lot of businesses can struggle and they get to a point where you almost feel like rock bottom, but all of a sudden there's that little spark. All you need is that little spark to kind of get things going again. So that's a great analogy with that tree. Thank you for sharing that story. Um, what do you feel is your branding is amazing. How do you see really differentiating your business amongst your the other spas out there trying to establish their own brand?
You know, um, Especially in this industry, it is tough to decide what's going to be really an enduring treatment, service, product, versus what's a trend, what's just the latest. PDRN, for example, came out, and I'm just like, salmon sperm, really? Now I've actually seen clinicals that back up, the promises there. But it takes time to get the clinicals when it's a brand new idea, thought. um, and if people don't jump on the train, then there won't ever be results that you'll be able to see or not see. But for me, I'm not one of those people that jump on the train prior to something being proven to my standard, which should be
Mhm.
demonstrable. I should be able to see it. I should have white papers. I should have reparable reputable people using it, recommending it, teaching it. So, my entire philosophy is results based. And if I can't demonstrate that it has the result that we're talking about, I'm not gonna bring it on. So it's something, one of the great things we can do is bring things on and use them internally.
Hmm.
I'm about to do some microneedling half and halves with some different products so that I can just measure, half my face and look and see, is the budget worth it? Is the treatment, how does it make it better? What are the differences? Because it's one of those things where there's a lot of quick things coming out and a lot of off-label and a lot of, very innovative, but unproven. And so I'm kind of willing to let other people play that and really, really look at the things that have legs.
Sure. Yeah. And obviously your reputation's on the line too. So you want to make sure that you have a quality product that you're introducing to people. That's really important. So how do you how do you resonate that in your marketing strategy or your branding? How does that resonate?
I really try to communicate that in the way of, there's a know, like, and trust factor, of course. And to be trustworthy, we have to build, you know, why? Why should you trust us over somebody else? Why would you trust your face to us? And I feel like a lot of people don't even ask that question adequately. So part of the way that I try to communicate that is by telling people they need to ask those questions. If this is off label, tell me why do you feel like, it's safe or effective to use it this way? Like, ask the questions. Don't just
Mhm.
assume that because something is happening that it's all been figured out and they know exactly what it's going to do and they know the complications that could come with it, because they don't. And so I do think that there's still a hesitancy to ask your provider about certain things, but I don't think that should be. So I think that's probably the biggest part of what I try to communicate in all of, my website and everything is just ask, make sure that they know what they're doing. How long have they been doing this? What are their credentials? How have
Mhm.
they tested it? Just ask the questions. And, when we're a solid company, we can answer them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You want to be able to kind of put that out there right up front to, to be smart about it, since that they're not asking, like you're kind of prompting them to ask those questions, which are really important. One thing you mentioned is primarily women are that's the vast majority of your customers, correct?
It is on the aesthetic side for sure.
On the aesthetic side. So, do you do any type of, how do you feel about men entering this type of market? And is there a growing segment of men that want to, maybe they've been apprehensive about it because they're men, but are you doing anything in your marketing to attract that population?
I am, and I love it. I think that men have different concerns, and obviously they're built differently. You've got a different thickness of skin and different density of muscle, and you don't lose collagen at the same rate that we do, which is very frustrating to me. But so there you have kind of your own unique things that you face. But Austin is it's a very natural, outdoorsy kind of vibe, but it's also very much about, high wage, high tech, you know, big company expectations. And so guys here want to look good. They want to look sharp. They want to look fresh.
Mhm.
Um, even like hair restoration, hair is not just for women, guys, it's for men. And,
Absolutely. I don't have too much going on here myself.
there are things that we can do to really adapt. And so on my website, I actually have a full menu for men's services. And, I have pictures of men. I have, the language is really, I think for the most part, at least in my experience, men are kind of more like in and out results, get her done. they're not there as much for the pampering and the, the lounge
Right.
time with a glass of wine. And, they're really results, no fluff is kind of my
Hmm.
thing with our guy treatments. And I want to make it a safe place for guys to come. I do feel like there's an older generation that would never say, that they've gotten some kind of cosmetic work, injectables, whatever done. But there's a younger generation that's totally fine with it. And they'll say it out
Sure.
loud all the time. So it does tend to be that demographic of like the 25 to 44 is kind of what I see for the most part.
Right.
And then, some a little above that 44, but for the most part, it's more younger. So it's more preventative, it's sharper. They're concerned about skin quality. I think that guys do care how they look.
Yeah, a lot of them do. I liked it decent, and especially for my age. I'm a little bit outside of that age bracket, but I would be self about that. So when you're deciding on pricing, for your treatments, how do you do that? Like, what's your philosophy on coming up with your treatment pricing, your packaging? What makes you unique in that standpoint from your business?
In every business I've ever owned, I've had a mantra that you have quality, you have service, and you have price. Those are kind of the three legs of the stool when it comes to what your values are and what you're offering. You've got, service, quality, price. And you have to pick two because you'll never be, if you pick price and one of those, if you pick price and service, your quality will not be able, you can't do both, right? So if you
Mhm.
throw price into the mix, as in, I want to be the lowest price or I want to be one of the lower priced, you're compromising your ability to deliver on quality and service. And that's fine because it can be a strategy. But for me, that's just never who I've been. I've always been quality and service. Um, there's a difference between value and price. And, I always want to, I want there to be an obvious value to people. So instead of cutting a price, I might add several things that maybe don't cost much, like adding a red light treatment onto the end of an injectables appointment, reduces the risk of bruising, really cuts down inflammation. And it's just, a 30-minute nap somebody can take on one of the massage tables. So, building up value so that people can see what they're actually getting and how it benefits them kind of can divert people from a price-based decision. Now you bring in a lot of people on ads, which, they're really coming to you because of a price. They're coming to you because of an offer. But for me, the theory in that is just, I want you to come in the door. So I'm going to give you a really good opportunity to save some money. But then once you come in, I want to keep you. I want you to see that we're different. I want you to experience the difference so that you become a loyal, lifelong customer. So, we do offer memberships, which we're rolling out our Timeless Talks membership right now, but we have 3 other tiers of membership, and our customers will love that. It's easy, it's simple, straightforward, and we're just kind of teaching people to budget monthly for their self-care.
Right. That's great. So you do an initial consultation with them once they respond to an ad and they come in, and then based on their unique situation, whatever their goals are, that way you can kind of, I guess, triage them to whatever service that makes sense for them at the time. And so there's an ongoing. Are your customers ongoing repeat customers that there's packages where they're constantly coming in to? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit, how that works?
Yeah, so we rolled out our AI, we call it the magic mirror. She sees your skin's future. And so it covers everything from your sun damage to your clogged pores to the loss of elastin and fibrin in your skin, hyperpigmentation, all of the things. And so we start every appointment with that. And that allows our providers to really see and understand what's actually going on, because everything else is subjective. I see this with my eyes. It looks like you are XYZ, but with that point of entry, we have then the information to really show you, yeah, you're not seeing this pigmentation yet, but we need to get on top of it now, because it's so much easier to keep it from building than it is to reverse it once it starts showing up. So we build all
Sure.
of our plans around that. And we really do, like, we do a quarterly rescan so we can judge the progress that you're making. If we're not seeing the progress, we have to dissect, what's happening. Are we being consistent at home? Are we coming in for a monthly treatment? Or did we skip 3 months? Ways that we can fine tune it, because, the entire goal is to get people the best possible results. And no two people are the same. So it
Right.
really, requires having the understanding to really make a complete diagnosis, and then having the ability to build a treatment plan that's going to be effective.
That's great. So that's interesting, using the AI mirror. Just curious, when did you implement that, and how people respond to that? Are they embracing of it? Are they kind of like, oh, I don't know, this is AI thing, or what's what's their reaction to that when you use that diagnostic?
For the most part, people are really excited. We have had people, including my providers, who don't want to do it because they don't want to know. They'd rather live in denial than, have it. So
Know
I
the
actually,
truth.
I had Gabby, one of my injectors, do it actually yesterday and do a training with it. And, she was so scared. She was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to know. And she did it. And then she's looking through her report, and she felt so encouraged, because her skin wasn't nearly as bad as she thought it was going to be. She really expected to see a lot of serious in the red issues, and she didn't.
Sure.
And so, I do see people like that, where they're just kind of like, I don't want to know. But, of course, we're not going to make you do it, but we do recommend it. You're um, not looking for the actual reality of your skin. It's going to cost you one way or the other at some point.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really interesting that it's able to do that, and kind of determine what your needs are, where you are. Very
Mhm.
interesting. So let's talk about, like, walk us through how you decide to add a service like Head Spa or Retire One. Like, what signals do you watch for that?
I basically, part of it comes back to the question that you asked about, how do we decide when to roll out, a new service? But it's kind of the same thing. I'm a little bit weird, so I'm like researching keywords. So when I decide that I even want to research it, that's the first thing I do. I want to see how many people in Austin are searching for this key phrase every day.
Hmm.
Um, then I want to see how hard it's going to be to rank for that key phrase. Um, because if you've got you know, 10,000 searches, but it's going to, take you 2 years to rank for it, you probably aren't going to want to necessarily put all your eggs in that basket, because it's going to take time. So often I look at those two factors first, and then I'm always looking for credibility, and then return on investment. So, if it's well known, obviously. If it's not, people aren't going to be searching for it. But if it's well known and it's got credibility, it's got a reputation for, people have heard of it, they believe in it, it's proven results, that kind of thing. And then the ROI, you've got to look at all of your costs. You've got to look at your labor. You've got to look at your training turnaround. And is it a trend? Is it something that is a sticky service? I think, having sticky services for your core services is really important. You want people coming back routinely. You don't want it to be a one-off. And that's where I find packaging services where, like Head Spa, it's
Hmm.
I would say it's a trend, but it's definitely the ROI is there, the demand is there, and it's just not a super expensive thing to get into. But because I'm a results-driven company, I want to package the head spa with other services that, again, maybe have a result that it's broader than just relaxation. So I've kind of decided with my head spa, I'm going to primarily be pointing people into microneedling, hair restoration, because we can't help your scalp, really start to nurture those little follicles if it's not healthy. So,
Right.
Trying to kind of introduce the education around it, and then packaging it with opportunities, to actually get some results in whatever way, again, and we'll still do the AI analysis with that. Sorry, I'm going to have to see what, can you hear that? My doorbell?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Hang on.
Sure.
Somebody rang the doorbell. Rude. I don't know. We have the lawn guys
Oh,
come.
no worries. So we were talking about that. And when it comes to these different types of treatments or bundling things, how do you train your service providers in a way that's they understand it, they feel confident in what you're doing? Like, kind of talk to us about your internal processes for training your people.
One of the things that I use in training is kind of a tiered structure. So I'll usually have my more experienced providers doing training. Often I'll have them, I'll have the newer providers doing the services on the more senior providers, so that I can get really good feedback. I have found that if I have them do the service, it may not be exactly, it often is a little bit different than what they're probably giving out on a normal basis. So, that tiered kind of mentorship within, I also do monthly one-on-ones with them. And I really, I just ask, what are you working on right now? We're professionals, and just because we graduated from whatever school it was, or, we've got our license in this, doesn't mean that that's the end all. It's just the start. So how are we, how are we measuring our ability, our professionalism? And part of it is really getting them excited about something. Unreasonable hospitality is our internal term. Like, we want to be so memorable, so over the top, that it can only be described as unreasonable. And when you kind of get your team excited about a concept like that, then they can apply it to each individual treatment that they do, and then they're excited to level it up. And that's, we always have to be leveling up. We can't just scoot along doing what we've always done, how we've always done it. We have to, we need to be inspired. We need to find people on social that, that we enjoy watching and learning from. We need to, find trainings locally. We need to be talking to our reps and finding out what's out there. But, keeping them engaged and knowing what they're excited about, and then helping to steer them, and then making sure to provide the opportunities for the learning as much as possible. But I do expect them also, to really seek those out on their own.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's kind of go back to on the marketing end of this, because I know obviously this is a business for you. You're an entrepreneur. You want this to be successful. What are you currently doing right now to acquire new customers on the front end, on your marketing end?
I primarily am we do a lot of social. We have we've got a fairly healthy Instagram, and get some good engagement there. And, we do Facebook meta ads. I'll boost some posts on Instagram. I know that there's a lot of people that don't think that works, but for me, it has. it will often tell me how much interest there is for something. And so I'd rather take a good offer or take a good educational post and boost it and see, how many people are watching it, how many people are engaged with it. And if it's a high level, then I'll turn it into a meta type of ad, or maybe do, some Google PPC or something. Um, but I find that that's a really good way to gauge your community, because what works in Dallas and Houston doesn't necessarily work in Austin,
Mhm.
so we're always having to measure, interest in our backyard, and what do people want. So that's kind of how I do that. I try to make sure that my website is strong, because I don't want to point people and pay for people to go to my website if they're just going to bounce. So I want it to
Sure.
be, that I want to be educational. I want them to understand what we're about, hear our brand voice, and decide if we're a good fit for them or not. We also do a lot with referrals. I think that referrals can be such a huge part of business. But when you've got happy clients, have them bringing, their husband, their mom, their sister, their teenager who has acne. You can grow your customer base that way as well. And I think it's, those people, if you've got somebody that you trust that has referred you, that's a way stickier client than somebody who's walking
Absolutely.
around.
Sure. Now you're doing all this yourself currently, right? You're not, because it sounds a previous conversation, you're really into this kind of thing, with managing the socials and the meta ads, and really enjoy it. So this is something you're a lot of time on your own doing all that on the front end.
Um, I do a lot of it. I pretty much come, I build the calendars and the concepts, and I've got my patient care coordinator is really good with, the Instagram, and I'm not calling it the Instagram, but like the Instagram posts and the stories and all of that. And she's also like boots on the ground, so she can get a lot more content than I necessarily can. So I do have her doing a lot of that. I honestly would have loved to find a partner that I felt like was effective, but part of the reason I do it is just because I not had great luck, finding partners in that space. Everyone says they'll do it, and everyone will take your money, um, but it's not easy to, communicate who you are, what your brand voice is, and it's, there are things constantly changing, and I feel like I know that there are ways to partner with excellent people, but I kind of started doing it out of desperation, honestly.
Do we
Think you froze on me, Brian.
Jennifer, are you back?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yep. You were totally gone, totally frozen or something on my end. Can't hear you again.
Okay, think we're back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're going to be able to edit all that, so don't worry at all. So we were just talking about before where we left off. You were actually doing all of this yourself with, as far as and you have an assistant, I guess, with Instagram and social media and everything that you're doing. Uh, that's got to be probably time consuming too, but also since you're so geo centralized to your location in Austin, it's got to be that much more important, right? To to handle that in a way that resonates with your local market.
Mhm. Yeah, it does. And with me not being from Austin, there's a learning curve there. I actually feel like of anywhere that I've been on the mainland, Austin feels like home to me. Quirky, independent, smart, driven people here, and loving nature and being out, loving the outdoors, complaining about the weather, complaining about traffic. Um, so yeah, they feel like my people, but there's definitely been a learning curve to what this market is actually looking for. And there's
Sure.
always changing as well. You really do have to keep up with, and again, for me, I'm sure that there are other ways that people do this, but I'm looking at trends, I'm looking at keyword, if something is falling considerably, that tells me a lot. And I'm not one to sit here and tell people what they should be concerned about. I need to, tailor my business to be aligned with my community. So,
Yeah.
people on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and now you mentioned that you're doing a lot of this on the marketing of yourself and SEO and social media. Do you have a lot of inquiries? Do you feel like the volume of the leads that you get or inquiries that you get? Are you happy with that currently?
No, I'm never happy with and I don't think I think if most people were honest, they'd say the same thing. I think it's probably the number one concern that a small business owner of any kind faces daily is, what kind of leads am I getting? Are they quality leads? Are they, are they one and done discounters? Are they going to be aligned with me and, our mission and good clients for us long term? And what kind of services, are they interested in? But there's just never enough. So, for me, there has to be a really constant way of, just making sure that you never rest, because sometimes you're so busy that you might set that aside because you just don't have time. But one thing I know, two things actually, is if you don't advertise, if you don't market, if you're not putting your brand out there, you will die. Um, and if you wait until the slow season to do it, you will die. So you've
Yeah,
got to stay on top of it. It has to be part of your daily, weekly, monthly, plan. You just have to allocate the time for
consistently.
it and the budget. But then
Sure.
also you're just making sure that you're constantly evolving and growing requires that adaptability that we talked about earlier. um, because I can be set in my ways. This is what we do, this is how we do it. But if I don't change with my community, I'll start losing to my competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to, and I obviously in business, saying is you got to spend money, make money, and you got to be out there consistently to be able to survive and to thrive even. Would you say, is when you do get the leads that you have, what is the biggest challenge that you have as far as turning those leads into paying customers?
The gap that's always present is the manpower to be able to reach out to people immediately. Because you have a 5-minute window, we know that. Like my patient care coordinator, she responds to all of our meta leads, but they might come in on her day off, or they might come in while she's driving, or they might come in the middle of the night. Like, people are weird with their online activity, and we have a lot of spikes at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what that's about, but it's a reality. And getting back to people 100% of the time within 5 minutes is impossible. It's impossible to staff that.
Yeah.
So I would say that, nurturing those people immediately, letting them know that, their query was received or their booking was received, or, being able to at least let them know that when you'll get back with them, because
So
we're
like a
very,
constant outreach. Yeah.
yeah, instant gratification is where people are. So if they don't get that response, or, the answer to their question, where are you located? Um, you're going to lose them. They're going to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Would you feel like a lot of your leads are kind of going through the sink, so to speak, dropping through because of what you just said? You have one person that basically following up with them. You feel like a lot of your ad spend, you're putting all the ad spend out there and all the effort, and then to have
Yes.
these leads kind of drop off. It's got to be pretty frustrating. No?
It's very frustrating, when people, I mean, even sometimes when you get right back to them, these are fickle people sometimes, tire kickers. They push the learn more button, they fill out a little bit, and then they ghost you. So,
That happens. Yeah.
yeah, it's, but it is that's a constant fear of mine. I'm always monitoring it, because yes, it sucks to pay for leads that you're not going to capture.
Right. No, I bet. There's ways to improve that with automations, which we discussed earlier. That's what my company, Virtual Pros, does. And we can talk about that later. But would you say that this is a common problem with most med spa owners in the industry? This specific problem you're talking about?
I would. I think actually probably most of the companies that I see are actually run by providers. I don't know how they do it, honestly. I'm working 12-hour days without being a provider. So, if you're a provider and you're stuck in a room, and you've got one front desk manager, you just don't have the manpower to do it. You just don't.
Right.
And I don't even. And then, so yes, I would say that's probably that, and I've worked with some companies that have had that as part of their package. Um, and just because it's part of the package doesn't mean it's functioning properly. I worked with a company. The bot was like literally harassing people, tormenting them. They'd already have
Oh
an
no.
appointment booked. They'd already be, in that category, and the bot is
Mm.
still texting them, calling them, emailing them, which causes confusion because they're like, I thought I was booked. So then you're constantly having to go back and be like, no, don't worry, it's just our crazy bot, which
Right.
takes power too. So I think there's a huge gap there, but also there's a gap of it working properly and being
The right
easy.
way. Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. So there's the concept of the automation is very important, but to your point, it has to work in a smooth way as to giving the customer experience that you would expect, to keeping your reputation intact, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Huh. That's really good to know. That's good advice to other med spa owners too. So before wrap this up, well, let's just talk about what are your goals? I mean, you acquired this company a year and a half ago. Where do you see Banyan Bamboo, say 5 years from now? What are you trying to accomplish specifically?
I think that my big goal is to keep the space that I have, which is huge. It's oversized. Nobody needs to start with a property this big, but I did, so I'm stuck with it. So
Everything's big in Texas, right?
they pay for it. Um,
Right.
but actually, I'm working on bringing in some other health providers into, my big space where I'm at right now. I'm going to have chiropractic, and I'd like to have functional health at least a couple days a week. so that I can maximize that footprint. And then I'd love to build some satellites and have, one treatment room, satellites around in some of the areas that are a little bit more out of town. So that's where I'd love to be, is just have a little bit broader footprint and not everything, right there. And, the thing about Austin is you've got a lot of pockets of people, but they're different. You've got your pocket pod areas, but they're all a little bit different. So you're going to be serving some different needs. So, for me, that's what is fun about business, is figuring out that stuff.
It's like a puzzle.
It's like trial and error. See what works, see what sticks. But, once I feel like I have this location kind of, in that space where I feel like it's efficiently functioning at a high level, and I don't have to be there, which right now I don't have to be there. I've got fantastic admin staff. But, when you open satellites, you're spreading yourself even thinner. So whatever you're doing, you have to expect that, especially in the startup phase. So, I'm hoping I can kind of start working that way in about a year. And then in 5 years, I'd love to have 3 or 4. We'll go from there.
Would you want to keep these satellite branches in the Austin area, or you want to expand out of that geographic area?
One of the things I've learned in business is it's easier to go deep than it is to go broad. I have developed relationships with my reps and, so many people in my community that if I'm going to duplicate my efforts, I'd rather do it in an area that I can use the same relationships I've already built. If I get a wild hair, maybe I'll open one in Hawaii. Because I love being over there. But yeah, I think that's what makes the most sense to me, is being within driving distance. And then, you can transfer employees back and forth.
Right.
You have a lot more opportunity to kind of share resources when you're closer.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. No, this has been great, Jennifer. So before we wrap the show up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners or the community, other owners, or anything else that would be insightful?
Oh gosh. Well, I feel like I'm such a newbie, in this it's the space technically, that I'm just really learning from other people. I love hearing people's ideas and the thoughts and how they've implemented, how they measure, how they track, all of those fun things about business. And I think that's part of being a good business owner, is being hungry for knowledge and understanding of, maybe what you're missing or maybe what you need to grow in. Because again, that leadership thing lands at your feet. So I can't be asking my employees to be learning and growing and getting better at their craft if I'm not. So I think that's really where I'm at, is, trying to find connections and relationships here in the Austin area. I don't, a lot of business owners can feel somewhat competitive. I've never really felt that way. I feel like they're more than enough. If you're a good company and solid and know what you're doing, we can coexist, because I can't take all of Austin anyways, as much as I'd love. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at, is really getting the opportunity to get more out there and explore the movers and shakers in the community, and just kind of keep going that way.
No, that's great. We were even talking about maybe having a podcast where you could even co-host, and having other med spa owners, just having a direct conversations about, insightful ways or strategic ways to help each other in a business. So that may be something we could do as well.
Yeah, that would be so fantastic. And I think a good podcast like what you're doing, your vision for this is really exciting, because every single time I listen to somebody share about their business and how they've landed where they are and what they're doing, it's so inspiring,
Absolutely.
And I love yours. You've stepped out and you're stepping into this whole new thing. And I think it's going to be fantastic. Your ideas are really phenomenal and meet a need. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I really appreciate that. This has been really a pleasure to get to know you and your business, and appreciate all the information and just sharing everything. And, I certainly wish you all the best with your business. And I hope that one day you get to not only have your satellites, but you have that faraway satellite in Hawaii that you might want to do. So, but yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for joining us on this podcast, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian, and all the best to you. And I hope that we talk soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.